Hey, it's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach and host of the Resilient Mother podcast. We have another exciting episode for you today with our April theme of I Can Do Resilient Attitude. And we're going to give you tips and trips and strategies today around finances, which I think is an important thing to have an I can do attitude about as a mother and to instill in the next generation. And my guest today is Lindsey, and she is a financial therapist who can give us some great ideas on this subject today. Lindsey, thank you for being here. Tell us more about you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So like you said, I'm a financial therapist. I've been a licensed therapist for 5 years, and then just in the last year, I've niched down specifically to financial therapy, which I personally did not know was a thing until I did. And when I learned about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing because I've been on my own financial wellness journey for almost, well, over 8 years now. And so it just kind of merged, helping people and money, and I think they go really well hand in hand together. And so I'm super happy to kind of find my passion, my niche, and be able to put that out in the world. And I've had wonderful, wonderful clients, and it's been really taken really well. So it's really fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know it was a thing either until I ran into a money coach and she taught me about money blocks. And I'm like, what? That's a thing. And I'm sure we'll get into that later. But to start out, I'd really love to know what your definition of resilience is.
Yes. So my definition of resilience is simply like overcoming the hurdles that are really put in front of us all the time and building up that confidence and that strength and just coming back to who we are in, our highest selves and really keep fighting the good fight all the time.
I love that. What helps you have a I can do resilient attitude about life?
I think a couple things. I like to be really intentional in my life in as many aspects as I possibly can be. And so some of that intentionality is taking a minute to kind of look at where I've been and where I am now and see the progress and the progression and transformation and really appreciate that and know that, hard things in my life have happened and they will happen again. But it doesn't mean that it should stop me or it will stop me. So yeah.
How do you think we can apply that to finances? I think people are very intimidated if they have not been taught, or that they may find with inflation and different things, finances kind of intimidating, and they might be scared to have an I can do attitude about that. How would you help them overcome a money block? A money block means that you have something in your past or an idea you're holding on to that's blocking you from creating the income that you want or to have it flow in your life. I believe I'm defining that correctly. So I'm interested to hear your definition of that and how you would approach somebody to help them get an I can do attitude about their finances.
Yeah, so my approach is really, first of all, identifying what we call like the presenting problem, right? So, like, what is the main issue here? If you are in a partnership, often I hear couples constantly fighting about money, right? If you're not in a partnership and you're handling all the money on your own, there's a lot of avoidance, maybe, or there's, like you said, intimidation or overwhelm or something along those lines. Those are really common words I hear people describing their money. And so we talk about that, like what is going on? Why is that your situation? But I think it's really important then to start actually looking backward and seeing where did you come from with your money? And so we call this your money story, which is completely unique to you. You have yours, I have mine. Even if we were born in the same year on the same day and we've experienced the same booms and busts and ebbs and flows of the economy, your parents taught you differently as my parents did, as my life experience did, right? So it's all unique to you. And so we know research tells us there's two bodies of research on it. One says that money habits are established by the time you're 7 years old, and the other says by the time you're 9 years old. So, given that the
Mhm.
audience here is primarily mothers, right? That can be a really significant thing to think like, wow, my money habits were established, we can comfortably say by the time you're 10 years old. What does
Wow.
that mean? And how has that impacted your current beliefs, emotions, thoughts, behaviors around money? Right. So I think that's a really important thing to examine when you're kind of diving into this, like, oh, I have a money block, as you say, right? Where did that come from? And why a lot of times it's an unconscious belief. We call them your money scripts. So things that you're telling yourself unconsciously or even consciously, right? Like a lot of women I hear say, "Oh, I'm bad with money." That's a common script I hear.
Mm.
What does that mean, and why do you feel that way?
Yeah, and I have kids that have been through that age, and were that age while I was going through a divorce, and so I'm thinking, "Oh, man." Um There are probably some scripts that they have already that I need to help them with, but, and so I'm curious how we do apply this to kids because I think as, when I became a divorced single mom, I actually turned to, like, Dave Ramsey and David Bach and now Mel Abraham. I looked for resources to get an idea because I knew I hadn't been taught enough and I didn't have the skill set, but my other motivation was that I'd been taken advantage of because I was naive about finances, which led to a bankruptcy that I went through. And that was a harsh lesson to have about not
Mhm.
having my own funds available, being dependent on others and allowing them to make decisions for me that weren't really theirs to make at the time. And and divorce in general as well was all tied with that. But having those 7 years of not being able to have credit actually did me a great service in learning what it is to live without credit altogether and to know what it is to build credit, how it is to manage my finances. And then on top of it, as a single mom, I have to prioritize where every single dollar goes. It has to have a job, it has to have a role. And then, there's times where if we have a little influx, we can have a little bit of those wants and not just meet our needs, but I have to be very intentional about it. And I still think there's money blocks I'm still overcoming, but I'm so grateful that I've been able to learn how to manage things better. There's a lot less stress in life and in relationships when you can communicate these things and you can apply them in your life. So, how would I apply it to kids, relationships? What are some stories you've seen of people improve these things? Just anything around that. I'm very curious.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at first, I'm so sorry that you've experienced that, and it absolutely attributes to the resilience that you have, and it speaks volumes about your character and the things that you've been through. So, but yeah, you're right. I think it is really intimidating for parents to hear, like, "Oh my God, how have I already messed up my kids by 10 with their money?" It's like so scary.
Right.
And the truth is, like, what I love so much about money too is you can always change your trajectory. So I always tell people, like,
Mm,
even if you were dealt kind of a shitty hand, right? It's like weren't you weren't fed on a golden spoon or whatever the expression is. You can always change that. And there's so much hope in money work because the truth is you can always earn more, right? You can always increase your
mhm.
earning. And in a lot of cases, you can spend less. You can also save, you can invest, right? Like all these different things. There's so much areas about it. The first thing I'll say when we're talking about money with kids, right, is the language that we use is really important. Whether you're saying like, "Oh,
Mhm,
you can't have that," can mean a whole lot of different things to them, and they can make up the story as to why they can't have something. Right? So
mhm.
I like to talk my kids are quite young. They're still 1 and 3, so I still have some babies.
You got time.
I got time. Yep. But specifically with my toddler, where it's like meandering through the store. And if she says, "Hey, mommy, like, oh, I really want this or something," I just tell her, "Honey, we're not prioritizing that today." And I always speak to things in
Mhm.
terms of being a priority, not a priority, higher on the priority list, not whatever. Because when we talk about things like that, it takes away the power that the money really has over it, where it's like, no, I'm being intentional about, we're saving for our vacation to wherever. And so we're prioritizing money there. So we're not going to get that toy today. Or the day that we do get the toy or the new outfit, and she's obsessed with dresses right now. So if we get a new dress, it's the best day in the world, right?
Yay.
Um, it's so sweet, and so if we like, truly, she needs a new dress, and so, like, I'll say, "Yeah, we get to prioritize, we're getting a dress today," and she'll be like, "Yay," and she's so excited about it, and so I think using some of that language can be so helpful because it also says that, like, you have the control, right? Your money is
Yes.
the one controlling you, you have the control of where you're prioritizing things, and what I will also say is let your kids make mistakes. If you have the older kids that are kind of trying to manage their money and you have the one that's like a really big impulse spender, they see the one thing and they're like, "Oh, my whole allowance or something is going to that." It's like, all right, they can make the $50 mistakes now because eventually, as you have more of these conversations and more time to let them grow and learn, then they're not going to make the $50,000 mistake down the
Yeah.
road, right? So the little
Mm.
mistakes are good building blocks, and it sounds like, I don't want my kid to spend all their hard-earned money on this, dumb, silly toy." And it's like, let them, and then point it out maybe a week later, like, "Hey, you bought that toy, but I haven't seen you play with it. Was that a good purchase? Was it maybe not? And the reverse is true also. If they bought a toy and they are still playing with it weeks or months down the road, you can point that out like, "Wow, that was such a good purchase you made," right? And
Mm,
talking to them in that kinda language where it's like, "Wow, that was really exciting," or, "What did you think about that?" And always, always, as much as you can, attach your money and purchases and things to emotions because we are always
mm,
after an
mhm.
emotion. It's not as much about the thing, right? It's about the
Yeah.
feeling that we want the thing to provide us.
And that's so true, and people talk about impulsive buying as a lot of emotion, and we have a very good, uh, network of advertisers and marketers today that know how to hit on those emotions because we make emotional purchases. And I've never thought of that language before. I would say the language I had around money was not empowering growing up, and it was more
Mhm.
of that they are the adults. They know how to run the money. I don't, and I never will was almost the dialogue I was given. And unfortunately, it was a lot of like, "Oh, just get married and you'll be fine." It's so not my story at all. And now I really empower my girls to like, no, learn about finances and have your own money and at least get your associates, be with someone who values you getting your education, like make sure they fit that frame and learn from the lessons that I've had. And also kind of create a generational change that's kind of the old mindset of only the man provides. In today's world, both parents, it's usually a two income household anymore to make things work. And women have so much more opportunities. And we can be moms and we can have careers. We can be coaches. We can be working outside the home and still be good moms. And I think that has definitely shifted and a few generations might be holding on to it a little too much. Just let us evolve with where society is going, okay? And let us let our children evolve because I think it's important to be empowered. How can they have an I can do attitude about money or about a career or about motherhood if any kind of limitations are put around it? I think that's where some people feel limited with finances. They're like, I have to have so much in order to be happy, or I have to hit this number in order to afford this, instead of feeling that there's abundance in the world and there's enough for everyone. And I see that shift in people. The ones that have the abundant mindset seem to attract the opportunities, and the money isn't so scarce versus the scarcity mindset. And so I've seen both sides and experienced both sides of that. Is that a transition people have to make as well? I love the tips with kids. I think you have to be the example of it too. And so that language that you're saying is more abundance. So can you speak to scarcity and abundance, the difference there?
Yeah, certainly. Before I do that, I'll just add on exactly to your point and even furthering that, right, is leading with vulnerability too. I think
Mm,
as moms, it has been so, at least this was true for me and my family growing up. And I think a lot of women, I'm 30, so 31. So a lot of people kind of experience this around my age is that our moms constantly felt like they had to be perfect. They had to be doing it all right. They had
mm,
to have
right.
all the answers. And the truth is you don't, right? We shouldn't, we don't. And showing that vulnerability to your kids, especially in something like money, where you say, mommy and daddy, mommy, whoever is in your house, right? Never learned about money, and now I'm really excited that I get to learn about it. And do you want to learn with me, right? Bring
Yeah.
them along on the journey. If how old your kids are is really great. Um, so if
I have
you're
this fun board game, speaking of that, called Cash Flow.
okay,
Um, but I think they're finally old enough we could actually do it together, but it's really good to show, how life works, and it's all about getting out of the rat race, as they call it, kinda getting out of more than just the 9 to 5 with money. Because I think you can learn to live on a 9 to 5 and work for somebody just fine, but some of the things you've talked about, investing and just being smart with your money and saving, can lead to so many other opportunities, and we have a lot of opportunities in the world now to create kind of money that flows at night when we're asleep if we do something online properly or sell something. And so I think the script has changed a bit on what that is. But what I like about the game too is like you get to pick a career at the beginning. And I've played it a few times with people and thought, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be the doctor. But it also comes with all the student loans. And
mhm.
so you think that that's gonna set you up, but if you're not managing things correctly or you buy above what you can afford, even with that title, you don't make it in the game. It really comes down to, you could be the plumber and win the game and come
Oh,
out at the
totally.
end with more, depending on what you do with the money. And so I think that's an important part of what we can teach. And there are fun resources out there more than that game. I know there's a lot more available than there used to be as well.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And I think we are definitely trending in that direction where there are more resources, there's more things available to start those conversations. And it's true. Like I've worked with clients with $40,000 incomes, and I've worked with clients with $400,000 incomes,
Mhm.
and the problems are the same, right? Because our spending habits, again, are so uncorrelated to our income because
Ah,
those spending habits have been established way before your income was ever established. And so
ah,
when you are just like you see that $400,000 number and you're like, "Yeah, we're rolling in the dough." But with that comes thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of consumer debt, of student loan debt, right? Um, and so all of it makes a big impact. And so I'm saying that to because so as somebody with like maybe a $50,000 income, here's like, how do you have $400,000 a year and you're still suffocated by debt, right? And it's like it happens. And I
mhm,
don't want to shame or guilt or perpetuate that narrative ever that is like anti what I am about, right?
mm,
Um and so if you are in that position where you are considered a high earner and you have experienced, a lot of money shame and guilt, it is very common.
mhm,
The stat out there says 90% of individuals say that their daily stress levels are negatively impacted by finances,
mm,
90% daily. So I'm like, that's a lot of people, right?
yes.
So I'm here to address how common financial stress is and also not normalize it because I don't want financial stress to be normalized, but I do want it to be voiced as something that so many people experience. So if this is you and you're hearing this, you're like, oh my God, it's me. Know that you are not alone. Okay. Um, so yes, and anyway, I feel like we got all over.
Yeah, that's all right. So, again, you're empowering people. I think there's a lot of people that could feel defeated. Oh, I only have so much income, or I had this much income, but I didn't manage it. But there's people every day who win the lottery and spend it all
Mhm.
within months
Yeah.
because of this. And it comes back to that spending habit. And I think that's really true. And I think there tends to be in couples that you can't have two spenders. It doesn't work very well. You have to have a saver and a spender at least, or if you have two savers, that works. But that doesn't mean somebody can't change. I've definitely changed and evolved over the years of through kids, through marriages, through divorce. I mean, I've been through 2 divorces and all sorts of different scenarios, on my own, not on my own, doing school, not doing school, all the time striving for the best scenario for me and my family. And it's looked different every time. But the thing that I'll always come back to is doing my budget, looking at my budget regularly and striving to save has always been rewarding. And I think during COVID, I really taught myself how to save. Kind of out of fear, I think, with a lot of people, but I I had a child on the way. I'm on my own. It's COVID, and during that time, I really stretched that saving muscle in a way I never have before, because the level of safety that I wanted for me and my kids was so important during that time to know that we have what we needed, or if we needed to move or something happened, I wanted to have everything in place, and not knowing too, being pregnant, you never know if there's going to be complications at birth. You just never know. You can be as prepared or as healthy as you want to. And so I had all of that motivating me. And I think people have that, or they have cancer, or they have something pop up that might give them more motivation to change. And I think that helps. But I think it's okay to evolve too. And it's okay to find the lifestyle that fits your family. And that lifestyle on whatever income can look different. And as long as you're comfortable with the lifestyle that you're creating, I think that's the empowered financing, because you can be happy with very little, you can be happy with a lot, but the stress comes from this constant need to do more, or a sense of lack, or not planning well. So, what are some like tools for planning? Budget is pretty general, but what are some tools that you give people to kind of de stress some of those factors?
Yeah, yeah, no, this is a great question. So I'm not a huge fan of the word budget in general myself. I don't
Mm,
if it works for some people, it works for some people. I've just never been good at tracking anything in my life. Like even when my babies were born and I was trying to track like their feeding schedule and their pooping schedule, like the things that like moms, are able to track,
right.
I quite literally was like my baby's life is like depending on my milk supply and I cannot track it. Like it's never worked for me. I don't think my brain is wired that way. And so for me, tracking expenses has just never been something that resonates well with me. And so I
Mm,
actually, a lot of my clients feel the same. And actually a lot of my female clients are late diagnosed with ADHD. And it's so common
mm,
that this is what I hear often from I mean, an array of people, but that seems to kind of be like the thing lately is like these women, have this diagnosis and they're like, now it makes sense why I can't follow a budget. And so anyway, what I like to use is a spending plan. And so it's the same idea, right? Is like I'm giving my money a job, but I think where so many people kind of fall short is not having enough clarity around what it is they are saving for, what it is they are spending for, what it
mm,
is that's going on, right? And a lot of times what happens is somebody, we'll use the 9 to 5 example, right? Is someone's in their 9 to 5 and they're really unhappy in their job. And all they know though is that they're really unhappy. And if you push a little further and you say, well, like, what would you like instead? What would
mm,
be your ideal day? They haven't gotten the clarity or the visual around what that actually even looks like. And so it's really hard to make your money match something that you don't have clarity on. And so for us, I'll give you one of the best examples. Um, my husband and I were kind of grappling with where we were going on vacation next. It was like, yeah, let's go somewhere. Where are we going? And I proposed Portugal. He came up with something else. Um, but I was like real set on Portugal, right? And so we're kind of going back and forth. And we honestly weren't really saving for this trip because there was no clarity around it. It was just like, I don't know, like we're going to go somewhere eventually at some point, how many years away, we don't know, like all these things. And then Thanksgiving night, he and I were home at the end of the night, kids were down, and he's like, you know what, I think we can do Portugal. I'm on board for it. And I was like, well, what I didn't mention is Black Friday. So shopping is my thing on Black Friday. I love
oh
me a
yeah.
good deal.
Mhm.
I love it. I'm suckered in and I'm the person that goes to the store. And I've been this way for like 4 years. Like I'm a new Black Friday shopper, but I love it. Maybe like 5 or 6, but anyway. And and on Black Friday, not only do I do all my gift buying that day, but I also like to buy something for mama because hello, I
Oh
also
yeah.
want things, right? So
Yep.
that is like my day where I'm like, I have the money saved, like I'm like going, I'm doing it. And as I'm out in the store, I'm like looking around and I see this sweater and I'm like, oh, it's really cute. I probably had like 2 or 3 occasions that I could already kind of see myself wearing this sweater to, throw it in the cart, no big deal, keep going. And I get like 2 minutes down the aisle and I'm like, the sweater's $40. It's not like a huge expense. But would I rather that $40 and I could literally see it. Like we just decided that Portugal was going to be on the horizon at some point. Again, like this is we haven't even we're still planning on this trip like down the road. But I'm like, I would rather sit at this little like bistro table across from my husband, sipping my drink. My kids are right there playing, and I have like the whole vision, like the true clear vision of where I would rather that $40 go than to this sweater that I have 12 other sweaters at home that I could probably choose from that would be just as, sufficient for the events that I was planning on wearing them to, right? And I love the saying, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. And it's a
Yes.
true example of that, right? Where I can have that $40, do one thing for me or another, but it can't do both. And what would I
Yes.
prefer? And so if we can learn to take a second to realize how, and again, it goes back to intentionality, right? If we can take a second before we click that one click to buy option on Amazon Prime that has
Mhm.
made it all too easy for us to shop impulsively, or if we can try just a little bit to outsmart some of the marketing tactics that are set
Mhm.
forth. There's a reason there's a Starbucks in every single Target now across the
Yep.
country is because when you're caffeinated, you spend more money, right? So they've
Mm.
done these things that are really consumer driven, like focused that way.
And then
Um,
if you know that, you can tell your kids that. I will often
that's
tell
right.
my kids if there's a commercial for it, you probably don't need it because they just had to sell it to you. And that's
Mhm.
really helped them think, "Oh, they're trying to sell that toy to me. I don't
Yeah.
really need it." Like, it's been a different dialogue, but I had to be aware of it first in order to have that dialogue. And
Yeah.
I'd say too, that, I did something similar when I took my kids to Disney, last year. There was a lot of dialogue around, but we're not eating out tonight because we're gonna save that for Disney, or we're
Mhm.
not doing this because we're saving it for Disney. And it made the
Beautiful.
conversation around money so much easier. So I thought about doing that with the trip, but I haven't thought about doing that with everything. And the dialogue you started with your kids, that makes a lot of sense. If you don't
Mhm.
have that clarity, how are you going to communicate with your kids or your spouse? And how are you going to have that clarity yourself when you go for a purchase?
Right.
And that I think that's a great example for people to think about. And if you aren't the budgeter, that also gives you the ability in the moment to make
Mhm.
the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love what you said. Again, depending on your kid's age, right? If you're going to Disney, if you're going somewhere, say, "Hey, the budget is, $5,000 and let's see what we can do with it. Where do you want to go? A beach, a mountain? Like what do you want to where do we want to go?" And start there and then okay, like how much is a rental car going to cost, right? And start running some of those numbers with your kids as they're getting of age where it can make sense and that can be huge, really really huge for both you and them. And it's again, be open and vulnerable as it's a learning experience and we're
Yeah.
learning together and that's awesome. That's really fun for them.
Another fun thing I did with my kids, I need to do it again, but the bottle broke. We had this huge plastic, one of those big, like, plastic Coke th
Yeah.
things that just has a slit in the top, right? And we would just keep putting our loose change in it over time, over time, over time. We had to kinda hide it though, because it was getting kind of full and we don't like, when it spilt over, it would make a big mess. But I remember when we finally filled that all the way full and we took it to the bank and we're pouring it in the coin machine and, like, we're all trying to lift it and get it in there together. And we're trying to make sure there's no special coins, like, going in along the way, that we may
Yeah.
have missed. Um, that it came to, like, I think 300, almost $400 and
Mhm,
change. And I felt like it was a really important lesson for them to see that
mhm,
just a little bit goes a long way. Because I think people think saving or budget or the huge things. They think these huge things. And
mhm,
it's really actually small daily little habits or little things that we do, like saving your spare change, that really add up over time. And
mhm.
the sooner that kids can do that, the sooner they're going to be able to be set up for life in general. They'll have more money to invest. I mean, they've got this age between 16 and 18 on their own where they're home, all their expenses are taken care of. Like they can really set themselves up. And I think sometimes people think, well, they need to save up for college or they need to save up for this or for that. Well, but what's their intention in their life? What do they want to do? We have a lot of students that are out there with student debt now that are not happy with that didn't lead to the job that they thought they were going to get. It's not so much of a guarantee anymore as much as a skill set. And so the sooner they can learn to save in general and then be really intentional with what is the outcome going to be with this degree? Is it going to be enough to pay off the student loans? Or is this career better and I'm going to save? Like, I think we're starting to shift the way we think about even what the avenues are for success anymore, but will always come back to having that clarity and having intention in what you do, whether it's with money or with anything else.
Yeah, yeah. I specifically remember like it was just assumed I was going to a 4-year college. Like I never had an option. We never even talked about other things. And I think you're right. Like, leave that conversation open to like, gosh, I really hope my kids are entrepreneurs. I'm like, that's great. Cause I think about too, I'm like, my first job, my W-2 job was at, 15 years old. And if I had really understood what investing could do for me then, I would be like damn near retired.
Right?
Not really,
Right?
but well, maybe. And so
Close.
it's yeah, yeah, it really is. I mean,
Closer.
it's way closer, right? And so it's just really important to start opening up our willingness to have these conversations and really opening adults are so bad at being bad at something, right? We're
Mm,
terrible at it. So when we are looking at like, ooh, I'm intimidated by my finances, I'm nervous about this. Well, yeah, but you're gonna be a beginner because you were never
yep.
taught. It was probably never taught in your
Mhm.
household. It was probably never taught in your schooling, and so you have to start somewhere. So find your support people, whether it's your spouse or your best friend or someone like me, a financial therapist, right? And have that support as you are learning. And then when you get to that point, and we're all evolving, like even right again, me, I'm not perfect, but we've come a really long way and I'm really proud of where we are now and it's exciting to say that, but at the beginning of our 8-year journey on this, right, it was, like, not exciting.
Yeah.
So, um, so you get to evolve and you get to that place where it does become fun and it does become exciting and a really great educational tool for your kids, and it really is the way to set up and build generational wealth, and truly something we're after, It gives you options and time, and that's what we want with our babies.
And you're making me think about how kids approach things. Like, they're excited to learn new things all
Yes.
the time. They never shy away from the "I can do" attitude. They're just like, "Hey, I've never done this before. Cool, let's try it," you know?
Right.
And somewhere as adults, we lose a little bit of that. So I think if we can bring back more of that childlike wonder and curiosity at realizing that there's a wealth of knowledge and options out there, and we can change the habits and we can correct course, and it doesn't have to be this huge shift of things. We don't have to like sell the car or change homes, or like it can be a little thing. It can be keeping your spare change and putting it aside, or auto drafting a little bit over here, or just being more intentional with your spending. I think we've given some great tips and tricks today, and there's probably more. If you like this conversation, want to continue, please comment that below. Like, what are your tools? What are your strategies that you're using with your kids? Let's have more of a conversation about this, and see what we can do to help the next generation be resilient with their finances.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, I love it. Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly it, right? We can all learn from each other, and if you have really good something, then share it, because that's how the world goes round, right?
Oh, and speaking of sharing it, if people want to work with you, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so I'm, coping with Lindsay on Instagram. That's an easy place to find me. I'm also copingwithlindsay.com. You can email me there. I have a form on my website. They have a whole page on financial therapy. But I'm a solopreneur, so it's always me emailing you back or DMing you back. So come find me. I love to talk about this stuff. And yeah, if you are kind of the person that's like ready, if you're not ready, it's okay. But you can come find me and I can just be in your feed. But if you are ready to really, really take control and stop feeling that overwhelm and start moving into that empowered, confident state, then I'm your girl. I'm here for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, listeners.